I fell in love with flying, just, I guess the sound, the beauty, looking down on the country and out into it's just, the whole thing is just, it's just embraced me. And I loved it to the extent that I spent my whole life at it now. No change. We were coming here from Colorado day before yesterday, and the countryside was just beautiful, and we were just cruising along. There were 4 of us in formation flying, and it was just great. So I don't know how I can describe it other than it's just so breathtakingly beautiful and fun and peaceful, and I love it. When I was 13 years old, my dad took my sister and me out to the airport, and he only had $1, and rides were $1, and so my sister got a ride and I didn't. So the following weekend, I went out to the airport with my own $1 and bought a ride, and I noticed that the guys that were selling rides in the airplanes weren't doing very well, so I asked them if they needed a ticket seller. They said yes. I started selling tickets, and I sold so many tickets they had to give some money back because it got dark and they couldn't fly all the passengers. As a result, they asked me to go with them barnstorming and as a ticket seller, and I did, starting that when I was 14. And this was 2 open cockpit biplanes, and that was my beginning. So I started flying, going from one town to the next, sitting in the front cockpit, getting a little time in the airplane. And so that was the beginning of my flying. After the barnstorming experience, I learned how to fly. I soloed when I was 16. I got involved in maintaining airplanes and so forth, getting 25 cents an hour for it. Then a fellow walked up to me when I was 18 years old and told me that his partner had cancer and couldn't fly any longer. Would I be willing to take his place? And it was in the air show business. And he said, I can't pay you anything, but you'll get a lot of flying time, and I'll pay all your expenses, and you'll be traveling all over the country, which was quite an experience for a kid. So I did that, and then we started out flying a piggyback act, one airplane fastened to another on top, one sitting on top, and we'd take off and do a routine fastened together, and then we'd break apart and do a routine after that. My first show was at Denver, Colorado, at a rededication of the Stapleton Airport. And I had never flown at that altitude. And I had never flown this airplane before that had all this outrigger to support the airplane that was on top of me. So we went through the routine, and when we broke up, I was supposed to follow the man that I was working for. His name was Danny Fowley. I was supposed to follow him, and I did, and we came down across the crowd. There may be 100,000 people. And he pulled up, and I pulled up, but with all my drag and everything, he kept going, and I stalled, and I spun. I did about, maybe a half of a turn of a spin. I just had time to push forward on the stick to stop the spin and back on it, and I hit. And it bent the wheels up like that, and so I can say that in my first air show, I spun in front of 100,000 people.
Cirrus Design's Vision SJ50 single-engine personal jet offers exceptional fuel efficiency, flexible seating for up to 7, advanced avionics, and all the Cirrus safety features you expect, including the Cirrus airframe parachute system. With its V-tail design, the Cirrus Vision is technologically advanced, yet engineered to be simple to fly, to allow owner pilots more lifestyle pursuits than any other personal aircraft. Learn more about the Vision SJ50 at cirrusdesign.com.
One of the funniest things that ever happened is that the Curtiss Pusher that I was flying was a 3-wheeled airplane. It had a nose wheel and back here, and it had no way to steer the airplane. All wheels were fixed, and it had no brakes. It had crashed a couple of times, and the fuselage got bent so that the front wheel was off at an angle. So when you landed, you couldn't go straight. It would make a turn. Well, on December the 7th of 1941, on Pearl Harbor Day, I landed at this field at a racetrack, Arlington Downs Racetrack, which was near Fort Worth in Dallas. And there was a lake out in the middle of the infield. And as I landed, I tried to avoid the lake and make the turn so that I wouldn't get into it. But I ended up jumping off the airplane, bulldogging it, and the airplane and I went out into the lake. And so I guess that was probably one of my most memorable experiences. On December the 7th of 41, all aerobatic or show flying was stopped, and only critical flying to the war effort was allowed. And they grounded a lot of airplanes. And so consequently, I went to work for Douglas Aircraft. I went out there and stood in a line the day that I got there, and there was a big long line. And I never got to the employment window, but I noticed at 8 o'clock sharp, a limousine drove up, and the driver got out of the limousine, ran around to the back, opened the door for the man in the limousine, and reached in and bought a bunch of plans and so forth, and followed the man into the terminal. The same thing happened the next morning. I still didn't get to the employment window, so the third morning I just went and stood where the limousine was going to stop. And before the driver could get out, I opened the door and asked him if I could help him, and he said yes. And he handed me some plans. I followed him into the building. He said, "You looking for a job, kid?" And I said, "I sure am." And he wrote a note out, and he says, "Take this down the employment window." On the way I read it, and it was signed by Donald W. Douglas, Douglas Aircraft, and it said, "Hire this kid." Then I went from there to instructing in the military down in Lufkin, Texas, for the glider program. For the Normandy invasion, they flew gliders across the channel and landed in Europe. And the gliders, of course, were landing at dark and everything and crashing. There was probably a 50% fatality ratio there. And so I instructed the students, I taught them to fly, for them to go and fly these gliders across the channel.
Integra Release 9 sets a new standard with the easiest to use pilot interface in all of general aviation. Access to any of Release 9's powerful capabilities is as simple as pressing the desired bidirectional page key. Pressing the same key in a desired direction navigates to the clearly labeled tabs with no more guessing as to what a given pilot input would do. Avidyne's Integra Release 9 is the next generation in fully integrated flight deck technology, and the easiest to use page and tab user interface is just one of the many benefits designed to make your flying easier and safer.
I've had the privilege of restoring 10 or 11 airplanes, and have built a couple, and I'm building one now. It's an all-wood Peton pole that was built first in 1929, and the Peton pole, the first one, had a Model A Ford engine in it. And there's one up on the north side of the field right now, and I flew it yesterday. So I'm building one. Anyway, I have restored a total of 11, I think it is. One being like a Waco cabin that's behind us here, another Waco straight wing, a Waco taper wing, another Waco straight wing, 2 Traveler 4000s, a J3 Cub, and I built this little airplane that's over here on display, the 2/3 scale, the Curtiss Jenny, the 1918 Jenny, and I donated it to the museum here. And I've restored my little Rose Parakeet, which is the one I'm sitting in front of. And I've flown them all, and I love it. I think maybe to start with, the pilot in 1935 or 33 and 34 in those years was really a hero. He was brave, you know, and he was smart, and he was daredevil and everything. So I think a lot of that, I think that attracted me because, you know, it's an ego trip at that time, and it still is as far as that's concerned. It's just become something that I've been so involved with. I'm 89 years old, and I will be 89 in December of this year. I've been at it a long time. I don't know how much longer I can do it, but I'm sure going to keep going as long as I can.